Good evening, and welcome to Release Your Wings. You know, Jesus spoke in parables, Aesop spoke in fables, and since the beginning of humankind, we've gathered around campfires and shared the stories that gave our tribes, our lives meaning. Tonight we're going to discuss the power of stories in our lives. I'm Dan Bagley. I'm interviewing Shireen Chada tonight, and we hope you enjoy our conversation. So, talk to me, Shireen, about how stories impact your own life and how you use them.
You know, when I was thinking about stories, I was thinking, the first thought that came to me is, I love stories. And especially I love stories if I have to take in a truth, especially if we are having a BK class or something like that. If I'm very tired, I can't, like my mind shuts off if it's just truth coming at me.
Right.
But if someone tells me a story, even if I'm tired, I'm able to ingest it. And so I was thinking how much I love stories. And there's a story I want to share.
Okay.
There was a Rabbi Baal Shalom or someone. There was a rabbi. He was a big legendary rabbi in Israel. And whenever he sensed bad things happening to his people, he used to have a thing he used to do. He used to have a special ritual. He used to go to a special place in the forest and he used to chant a special fire. And those three things would invoke God. And God would come and create a miracle where all of the bad things to his people would go away. And so he did that. And the next generation, his disciple, who was his successor, again, bad things were happening to the people of Israel, and so he said he went. He knew the special place in the forest, but he didn't know what the special ritual was. But he knew where the special place in the forest was, and the special prayer. So he did both of those, and God listened, and he performed a miracle, and the bad things went away. The disaster was gone. And then his successor, he just knew the special place in the forest. He didn't know the prayer and he didn't know the special ritual. So he just went to the special place in the forest and said, God, you have to do something. And God said, okay. And then the disaster went away. And then his successor didn't know any of it. He didn't know the special place in the forest. He didn't know the special ritual, the special fire, or none of that stuff. But he moaned to God and he said, you know, I don't know any of those things. All I know is I can tell you a story about it. God heard and he averted the disaster. Because he knew, because God loves stories. And also he knew that people live through stories.
So we live through stories. Why? Is it how we create meaning?
It's how we create meaning and also how we connect with each other. And I feel that there is a creative part of us, and then there's an analytical part of us with the left brain and the right brain that people talk about. And actually science is supporting this, about this whole idea of story. And even in psychology, I heard that people who can relate to stories and can tell their stories have a better chance of getting better sooner because they are relating their things to a story.
Thus, psychoanalysis is very often just telling the story. But, you know, it seems to me that sometimes we create stories about our lives. You know, I was just born to lose. I've always done. And those stories don't always serve us. So what do we do? What do we do with that?
I feel that if I'm experiencing sorrow, then I'm telling myself the wrong story.
So here's the model that I'm hearing underneath this, that something happens, we often create a story around it, then we believe the story as if it's real, and we forget we created the story.
Right, or I'm telling myself the wrong story, that there is a perception. You know, two people could be watching the same thing and they'll tell you a very different story.
Eyewitness accounts are notoriously inaccurate.
Right, that they'll tell you a very different story. And so if I'm experiencing sorrow, because reality really reality is nothing but happiness. If I know my real self, if I know who I am and what I am, then there's nothing but happiness. So if I'm not looking at reality and I'm experiencing sorrow, then I'm telling myself the wrong story. There's something about illusion there that is telling myself the wrong story. That's one. And I also was thinking that when I am a person because I have a story. And also, I can be the star, the hero of my own story.
And we all are really central characters in our own story.
But especially that we shouldn't play victim as a central character. I have to play the hero.
Yeah. So when you're feeling like you're a victim, or any of us feels like we're victims, we should say, I'm not really a victim, I'm just playing one in my story, and then move on to another story, to a better story.
No, or also see what is it that I have to do to play hero, to play the victor, from victim to victor. So if I want to be victorious, what is it that I have to tell myself now? What is the different story I have to tell myself?
So in any given time, I'm hearing you say that in any given time we're feeling down or put upon or whatever, we really have the creative power to write ourselves a new story and start stepping into that.
Yeah, you know, when you think about stories, I feel that there are 3 levels of stories. There is the pure story. And when I'm talking about the pure story, I'm not talking about Pollyanna, everything is good, the grass is green and the flowers are shining kind of a story. But that in that story, virtue always triumphs. That there is vices, there is negativity, but virtue always triumphs. And then there's a middle level of story which is about passion and about this and that and doing this and that. But we won't get into the middle level of story. I do want to get into the negative, the lowest level of story, where the story is so bad that that I tell myself the wrong stories. Like I tell myself the victim story and think that's great. I feel that's kind of like a low level of story. And I know this research in positive psychology has shown that when people are shown images and pictures of Mother Teresa and telling the story of how she helped people there, that actually people felt elevated.
Right. So when we say that we take the highest level of story, we're not saying I'm now going to write that I'm a millionaire, so I'm going to have this. What we're really doing is saying I can resonate to the highest values, which will give me the peace, the happiness, the joy.
Right.
And which, by the way, are not dependent on being a millionaire.
Right. I feel the middle level of story is, if I write I'm a millionaire, I'll become a millionaire. I feel that there is always a chance for that degrading to the lower level.
Yeah.
If it doesn't come true, if it doesn't work, then it's always that my happiness is so dependent on me getting $1 million that if I don't get it, then I'll very soon become the victim. And so it's very important to be in that state of story where my ethics and my values are reinforced by the story.
So do you have to consciously think your story, or do you stay true to your values and your story unfolds in that positive level?
I feel life happens. Life is a story.
Sure.
And like I was saying, God loves stories, and so He's made people, and people have stories. Everyone has a story. And so what I've noticed is that you have to learn to tell your story, your personal story. And if you learn to tell your personal story, your memories and what impacted your life and what impacted your life for the better really come out better.
So it's really like nourishing thoughts, just like nourishing foods. And the more nourishing your thoughts are at the highest level of story, then probably the outcome that you get from your story will be more positive. Is that right?
Right. Right. So it's here we are talking about our own story, our own personal story. Yes. Yes. So if I'm telling myself my story, and actually it's important to tell the story. In many times, especially if you have experienced any kind of sorrow, I feel the first step to experiencing sorrow is I keep it inside.
That's right.
And so if I really want to let it out, I mean, not to announce it to the whole world, but to at least some people you trust, you start telling, so that sorrow, that thing comes out, the sorrow comes out. And also, when you start telling your story, then you become a master, because then you can redirect.
Yeah.
Because now you're in, whenever it happened, you might not have been in control. But now you're able to look at it, and you're able to become a master, and so you're the director of the story now.
Yeah.
And so then you're able to take the lesson that's there and redirect it into, how do I become the hero?
I once read an analogy that when Shakespeare wrote his plays, he could write any character to do anything, but he also performed in his plays. And when he was just being the performer in it and not realizing he was the author of it, he had no freedom at all. He had to be that character. So what I'm hearing you say is just about that. When we realize we're the master, we are the ultimate storyteller, we can start shaping our story into the directions of who our character should be.
Right, right. And so let's say I've experienced sorrow and someone inflicted sorrow on me, and people can say, but how can I change it? But I feel it's not about changing the past, but if I start talking about it, then I'll start changing the future.
So also you and I have discussed that there is no real suffering outside the story we're telling ourselves. And you touched on it earlier when you said if you're in pain or suffering, just tell yourself a better story. So often
I feel not only a better story, we're telling ourselves the wrong story.
Yeah.
We just need to tell ourselves the right story.
And the right story is that the game that God has given us is aimed at our winning. It's biased toward our succeeding, finding happiness, to being one with.
Right. There is a point where there is no story.
Ah, yes. Yeah.
And periodically during the day, to get to that space of no story.
Which would be the meditation time.
Yeah,
the quiet
time, but also there is a drama. This is a stage. Since you brought up Shakespeare, this is a stage, there's a drama going on. Everyone is our actor, and I'm also an actor in this play.
Right.
I can't decide other people's script. I need to understand that. They have their own script, and I cannot decide that. I cannot remote control people. They have their own script. But I need to, that's one aspect I need to understand. But the second aspect, to tell myself the right story, but the second aspect is I have the choice to move away from this play. I have the choice to exit the story at any time. And it's very, very important to exercise that choice and exit the story.
So by analogy, if you're watching a movie on television that you find upsetting, you would be smart probably to change channels or turn off the television. And if you are doing that in your mind, creating dramas that have you unhappy, loser, whatever, then changing your mind is analogous to changing the story in the channel.
Right, right. But I feel that if I am the soul and I have this is my costume and I'm playing my part and all of that.
Sure.
But I, as a soul, can exit. I can exit the play in my own thoughts because I'm the master. And when I exit that play, then when I come back into the play, I come back with renewed perspective, with a different perspective, with renewed energy, with totally different things.
More resourceful. So this isn't that you change it in your mind and suddenly everybody acts differently. It is you change it in your mind and you have more resourcefulness for handling whatever the situation is.
I feel in all of the story, it's not only important to tell when I'm experiencing sorrow, but it's also very important to exit the story.
Yeah.
Periodically to just exit the story.
Because I heard someone say one time, what you bury alive when you're in just denial of such things. So you're saying acknowledge it, have the story, and then see your role in the story and as a creator of potentially a creator of a better story. Right,
yeah. By exiting the story, when I come back, the story will change.
Yeah, because you have changed.
Right.
And you can't step in the same story twice using the river analogy.
Right.
So good. As we're wrapping up this then, I think the real question is, which stories do we want to have driving our lives?
For me, I feel that there is one amazing story. And that amazing story is God's work. And if I keep telling myself the story of God's amazing work, and then not only do I receive power, but also I play a better character in the story.
Very nice. I hope you enjoyed this evening, and ask yourself, what story would you like to be living more like? Good evening, and thank you for joining us.